My name is David Hartley. 31 years with the Metropolitan Police, 17 of them in crowd control, and I have watched human beings do genuinely stupid things in the vicinity of genuinely dangerous animals more times than I can count on both hands and both feet combined. I retired in 2019. My wife Sandra told me I needed a hobby that didn't involve a radio and a high-visibility vest. I became a walking tour guide in central London, which, I can tell you, involves significantly more radio communication than retirement should, and a high-visibility vest I bought myself because old habits. I was standing on the mall on a Thursday morning in October when a National Express coach, one of those long diesel ones that smells like it's been running since the Falklands, backfired directly beside a mounted household cavalry soldier. The sound was a cannon, no other word for it. And I watched 43 tourists simultaneously flinch, grab each other, drop things, and prepare in the way that crowds prepare, for something terrible to happen next. It didn't. That's the story. Except it isn't, because the reason it didn't is the most interesting thing I have seen in 31 years of watching human beings and animals share space under pressure. Let me tell you what actually happened. First, let me tell you what usually happens. Because if you don't understand what usually happens, you will watch this incident the wrong way. You will see a horse stand still and think, "Fine, horses stand still, that is what horses do." You will miss the entire thing. Horses spook. This is not a character flaw. This is 400,000 years of survival engineering. A horse's nervous system is not built for the modern world. It is built for the Pleistocene. It is built for a world where any sudden sound, any peripheral flash of movement, any unexpected compression of air means a predator has found you, and you have approximately 1 second to decide which direction to run before you are something's dinner. That wiring does not care that you are on the mall in London. That wiring does not care that the sudden sound was a diesel engine having a mechanical disagreement with itself, rather than a lion making a territorial decision. That wiring fires anyway. It fires first. It fires before the conscious brain has time to file an objection. A horse weighs between 500 and 700 kilograms. A horse in full flight spook covers ground at roughly 50 kilometers per hour. A horse that has decided, on a cellular level, that it is about to be eaten, on a road lined with tourists and children, and a man named Gerald who is narrating everything incorrectly into his phone. That horse is not a traffic inconvenience. That horse is a catastrophe on 4 legs. And it has happened before. Not often. Not with these horses, not with these riders. But the before exists, and it is why the training exists. And it is why when I tell you what the rider did in those 4 seconds, I need you to understand what he was managing. Before we get to the 4 seconds, let me tell you about the horse. His name, according to the public records the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment publishes, was not available to me. The regiment does not release individual animal names casually, but I will call him what the tourists around me called him, which was Oh God and the Big One, and in Gerald's case, the Majestic Beast, which Gerald said with the complete confidence of a man who has never been within 12 meters of a horse in his life. The Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment is not a ceremonial costume operation with animals attached for atmosphere. I want to be very clear about this, because every year I watch tourists approach these horses with the energy of people approaching a theme park prop, and I watch the horses regard them with the energy of animals that have been trained to tolerate this while internally filing complaints through channels. These horses are sourced primarily from Ireland. They are selected for temperament, for size, for soundness of limb, and then they are trained. The training alone takes 18 months before a horse is considered ready for public duty. 18 months. The horse learns to tolerate drums. It learns to tolerate crowds. It learns to tolerate flags snapping in wind, children shrieking, motorcycles, sirens, and this is specifically documented in the regiment's public materials, gunfire. Not backfires, gunfire. The riders train alongside them. The bond between a household cavalry trooper and their assigned horse is not a cinematic exaggeration for the benefit of tourism brochures. It is a functional working relationship that takes years to calibrate, and that, under pressure, operates on a frequency so fine-tuned that external observers, even experienced ones, can miss it entirely. I missed it the first time. I watched the video back 4 times before I saw what the rider did. The coach pulled up at 10:47 in the morning. I know the time because I had just checked my watch to calculate how long Gerald, who had attached himself to the rear of my tour group without paying, I clocked this immediately, 31 years of police work. How long Gerald had been providing his own parallel commentary to my tour. 11 minutes. Gerald had been narrating for 11 minutes. He had already incorrectly identified the Victoria Memorial as a tribute to Princess Diana, described the mall as the road to Windsor Castle, and referred to the household cavalry as the Queen's personal bodyguard, which is technically outdated by a monarch and historically approximate at best. Gerald had his phone up. Gerald was filming. The coach had pulled into the service lane, the long flat stretch that runs parallel to the processional road, and it was idling. These coaches idle loudly. Anyone who has spent time in central London knows this particular sound, a low, sustained diesel grumble that becomes ambient, that you stop hearing after a while the way you stop hearing the central heating. The backfire was not ambient. It came from underneath the rear of the coach. A single compression explosion that the autumn air carried with perfect acoustic efficiency directly across the 30 meters of tarmac between the service lane and the mounted trooper. I felt it in my sternum. The tourists felt it everywhere. I watched a woman from what I estimated was an American tour group grab the arm of the man beside her with both hands. I watched a teenage boy drop his Pret-a-Manger bag. I watched Gerald, and this is important, Gerald did not drop his phone. Gerald, to his credit, kept filming. Gerald also said, loudly and with great authority, into his recording, "The horse is going to go mad." Gerald was already wrong. Here is what the crowd saw. The horse's head came up, a sharp upward snap, ears rotating forward and to the source of the sound simultaneously. The whole massive neck going rigid for 1 fraction of a second. The rider's upper body moved, a visible shift, a tightening that even from 30 meters read as alarm. The crowd held its breath. Gerald said, "Here we go." Here is what was actually happening. The horse's head came up because the auditory startle reflex in equines is involuntary and begins before conscious processing. The ears rotating was the brain triangulating the threat. The neck tension was the first stage of the freeze-flight-fight cascade. The horse, in that first quarter second, was doing exactly what 400,000 years of wiring told it to do. And the rider felt all of it. Not saw, felt. Through the saddle, through his legs, through the contact points that a trained cavalry trooper learns to read the way a surgeon learns to read through instruments. He felt the horse's back come up. He felt the shift in weight toward the hindquarters, the loading of the engine, the body preparing to move fast and away. The rider's upper body movement that the crowd read as alarm was not alarm. It was the opposite. He dropped his shoulder. His right shoulder barely perceptibly dropped. His seat, the technical term for how a rider's weight sits in the saddle, deepened. Not tightened, deepened. There is a difference that takes years to explain and about 4 seconds to execute, and that difference is the entire story. He exhaled. You cannot see an exhale from 30 meters, but the horse felt it. The horse felt the change in the rider's ribcage, the release of tension across the thoracic spine, the signal that travels from human nervous system to animal nervous system through the medium of physical contact and years of established communication, and says, in a language older than words, there is nothing here that requires fleeing. The horse's head came down. Not slowly, not dramatically, just down, back to where it was. The ears rotated once more, a final check, and then returned to their forward rest position. The tail, which had begun to flag, settled. The whole thing took 4 seconds. Gerald, who had been filming, lowered his phone with an expression I can only describe as personally disappointed and said, "Oh, it's fine." The video Gerald posted, because of course Gerald posted the video, got 300,000 views in 4 days. Not because of the backfire, not because of a dramatic spook, a thrown rider, a screaming horse, a crowd scattering. None of that happened. 300,000 people watched a horse not do anything. And something about that, something about the specific texture of that nothing, made people share it. I have been thinking about why since October, and I think I have worked it out. We have been trained, by approximately 15 years of viral video culture, to expect institutions to fail publicly. We have been trained to expect the dramatic outcome. The guard who shouts, the horse that bolts, the authority figure who cracks under pressure and gives us the satisfaction of watching the official version of events come apart at the seams. That expectation is so deeply encoded now that when the opposite happens, when the institution holds, when the training works, when the calm is real and not performed, it registers as extraordinary. It shouldn't be extraordinary. It should be ordinary. It is, in fact, what these people and these animals practice every single day. But we have forgotten what quiet competence looks like because quiet competence does not generate content. Quiet competence does not have a thumbnail. Quiet competence is, by definition, the thing you almost miss. Gerald almost missed it. Gerald was already composing the caption for a different video, the one where everything went wrong. When everything went right instead, Gerald needed a moment to recalibrate. 300,000 people recalibrated with him. Let me tell you what a backfire actually does to a horse's nervous system, because I think if you understand the biology, the 4 seconds become even more remarkable. The auditory system of a horse is significantly more sensitive than a human's. A horse can hear frequencies between 14 Hz and 25 kHz. A human tops out at around 20 kHz on a good day, lower as we age, lower still after 17 years of crowd control work involving loudhailers, which is a professional observation I make about myself specifically. A backfire from a diesel engine produces a sharp transient sound, a spike, in the frequency range that equine hearing processes as high-priority threat information, not because horses have encountered diesel engines across evolutionary time, but because the acoustic profile of a sudden percussive sound shares enough characteristics with the acoustic profile of a predator strike, the snap of a branch, the bark of a large carnivore, that the threat assessment system does not wait for confirmation. It responds. The response is a cascade. Adrenaline enters the bloodstream. The heart rate spikes in a startled horse, from a resting rate of around 32 beats per minute to upwards of 200 in under 3 seconds. The muscles of the hindquarters load with blood and oxygen. The vision widens literally, the pupils dilate, and the visual field expands toward the periphery to maximize threat detection. The horse is, within 2 seconds of the stimulus, a physiologically different animal than the one that was standing on the mall 11 seconds ago. Now consider what the standard human response to a startled horse is. Grab tight, pull back on the reins, grip with the legs, lean forward, gasp, shout in some cases, which introduces a second auditory stimulus on top of the first. Every single one of these responses tells the horse's nervous system that the threat assessment was correct. Because here is what the horse's threat assessment system is doing in those seconds. It is not just responding to the sound. It is reading every contact point it has with the world, the ground, the air, the rider for confirmation. Is the thing I am touching frightened? Is the thing I am touching accelerating away? Is the thing I am touching telling me through its own physiology that I was right to be afraid? A rider who tightens says, Yes, you were right, something is wrong. A rider who drops their shoulder, deepens their seat, and exhales says, I have assessed the situation. There is no predator. You may stand down. The horse believed him. That is, in its entirety, what happened on the mall at 10:47 on a Thursday morning in October. A human being, through 18 months of the horse's training and however many years of his own, communicated calm directly into the nervous system of an animal that was already 3/4 of the way into a full spook. In 4 seconds, without the crowd knowing they had watched anything at all. Let me walk you through those 4 seconds one more time. Because now you know what to look for, and it is different this time. The backfire hits. The horse's head snaps up. You see this as alarm. It is actually data collection. The ears are triangulating, the eyes are widening, the nostrils are sampling the air. The horse is gathering information at a rate a human nervous system cannot match. The rider's body moves. You see this as flinching. It is not. Watch the shoulder. The right shoulder drops. The chest opens rather than closes. The lower back, instead of bracing against the movement it anticipates, releases. In classical equestrian terminology, what he is doing is called sitting into the horse. It means making yourself heavy in the saddle in a specific way that communicates rootedness rather than tension. He exhales. You cannot see this. The horse feels it as a pressure change across the rider's entire torso. The horse is reading this signal the same way it reads every other signal. Is this creature I am carrying afraid? The answer the exhale gives is no. The head comes down. Not a trained response, not a conditioned behavior, a genuine neurological de-escalation, horse deciding on its own terms, based on the information available to it, that the threat was not a threat, that the human in the saddle had assessed the situation and found it manageable, and the horse, trusting that assessment, agreed. The ears settle. Gerald lowers his phone. 10 seconds after the backfire, a horse stands on the mall as if nothing happened, because as far as its nervous system has now concluded, nothing did. 300,000 views, and I would bet a significant portion of my pension that most of those viewers on first watch could not tell you specifically what they saw. They felt it. That is different. There is something in the human nervous system that recognizes calm under pressure. Not as an intellectual category, not as something you can point to and name, but as a felt thing, a register that sits below language. We recognize it the way we recognize the smell of rain before it falls. We don't know we're recognizing it until we've already relaxed. That video made people relax. In a year of content specifically engineered to produce the opposite effect, 300,000 people watched a horse stand still on a London road and felt, for 4 seconds, that someone knew what they were doing. That someone had a handle on it. That the situation, whatever it was being managed by a person who had trained for it, who had prepared for it, who had built a relationship with a 600-kilogram animal over years precisely, so that when the moment arrived, the moment would not become a catastrophe. It was managed, quietly, completely, without drama or announcement or any of the external markers we have come to associate with competence, because those markers are, it turns out, mostly the markers of performance. Real competence doesn't perform. Real competence drops its shoulder and exhales. Gerald, for what it's worth, captioned his video, "Horse nearly goes mad near Buckingham Palace, must watch." 41,000 people watched Gerald's version specifically. The comments on Gerald's video are my favorite thing about this entire incident, because within the first 100 comments, someone who identified themselves as an equestrian explained, in considerable detail, what the rider had actually done. And then someone else explained it, and then someone else. And Gerald's video, which was supposed to be about a horse nearly going mad, became an impromptu masterclass in equine nervous system response and classical cavalry riding technique. conducted entirely in the comments section of a video Gerald titled incorrectly. Gerald, to his enormous credit, pinned the first explainer comment. Gerald wrote underneath it, "Did not know any of this incredible stuff." Gerald was right about that, at least. I have been a walking tour guide in central London for 5 years now. I have told hundreds of people about the Tower of London, about the changing of the guard, about the history of the mall as a processional space, about what these mounted soldiers actually are and what they are actually trained to do. And I have watched, hundreds of times, the moment when a tourist realizes that the thing in front of them is not a prop. It always comes late. It comes after the photo, after the video, after Gerald has already captioned everything wrong. It comes in a quiet moment when the crowd thins slightly, and a person finds themselves actually looking, not performing looking for their camera, but looking. And the animal turns its head and meets their eye, and the tourist goes very still. That stillness, that is the moment they understand. These horses are not decoration. These riders are not actors. This is not a performance in the way that word means for tourism purposes. This is a working institution that has been training human and animal together for centuries, calibrating the relationship between species under pressure, building something that does not have a good word in modern English for what it is. It is preparedness as a form of respect. It is training as a form of care. It is the decision, made and remade every single day, that when the moment arrives, the backfire, the crowd surge, the unexpected compression of diesel air against autumn, the answer will be ready before the question finishes forming. The horse believed the rider. That is the story. Not that the horse stood still, not that the backfire failed to cause chaos, but that somewhere in the years of training and the accumulated trust between those two nervous systems, a question was asked: is this safe? Is this manageable? Is there someone here who knows what they're doing? And the answer came back before the asking was finished. Yes, I know. Stand down. I want to ask you something before you go. When did you last see quiet competence and recognize it in real time? Not in retrospect, not in a video you watched 4 times to understand what you'd seen, but in the moment, as it happened, before Gerald told you it was going to go mad. Because I think we have built an information environment that is very good at showing us failure and very poor at showing us the thing that prevents it. The thing that prevents it doesn't make a sound. It drops a shoulder. It exhales. It is present in the right way at the right moment, and then the moment passes without incident, and we film the absence of incident and try to caption it, and find that the caption doesn't quite work. Because the caption for genuine competence is always the same thing. Nothing happened. And nothing happening, when everything was in place for something to happen, is the hardest thing there is. The Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment does it every single day on the mall, in front of tourists who are mostly filming Gerald's version of events. They do it without announcement. They do it without acknowledgement. They do it because they trained for it, and the training worked, and a horse stood still on a Thursday morning in October, and 300,000 people watched and felt something they couldn't quite name. If you have watched someone hold something together quietly, a moment, a situation, an animal, a room, tell me about it. I read every comment. Sandra says I spend more time on the internet than I did on shift, which is both an exaggeration and not entirely inaccurate. And if you want to understand more about what these mounted regiments actually are, not the ceremonial surface of them, but the working reality underneath, stay with me. Because the thing I have learned in 5 years of standing on the mall explaining things to people who are filming Gerald's version is this. The real story is always in the 4 seconds nobody was watching correctly. David Hartley is a retired Metropolitan Police officer and Central London walking tour guide. He has watched Gerald ruin 17 separate tour group experiences across 5 boroughs and holds no personal animosity.